I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from the bowels of the FEMA Region 5, deep in the heart of the United States of amnesia. Today is June 13th, 2014, and I've been off the air for a couple of weeks. I was over in England on a vacation, traveling around, looking at all the houses. Didn't see a stone house, didn't see a wood house anywhere. All mostly stone houses. Was up in the North Country Lake District. It was a great way to get away from it all, more or less. And I found it interesting. A couple of things were going on in England at the time. Can't keep away from the political stuff completely, even when I'm in a different country. I just listen to what's going on over there. One of the things that was very interesting was that people were talking about Scotland possibly separating from the United Kingdom. I thought that was rather interesting. They said, well, it probably won't happen. But just the fact that they're set to vote on it and they may become their own independent country is fascinating to me. Of course, Scotland has been fighting to get independence from Britain for probably, I don't know how many years, 700, 800 years. So if England were to just let Scotland walk, that would be very interesting development. It flies in the face of the consolidation of countries into one giant world country that the globalist owner class has been striving for. And, well, I guess it depends on who owns Scotland. I suppose if the same person owns Scotland who owns England, then it wouldn't matter if there was an independent country by the name of Scotland if it were not truly independent. The other interesting political event that I witnessed when I was over in England, and this was during the second half of May, a couple of weeks ago, there was an election which went all across the EU. And the result of that election was that there was a tremendous move to the right. And England has a political party called the UKIP, which stands for United Kingdom Independence Party. And it was really kicking butt in this election. It kicked butt on the Tories, on the Labour Party. It almost knocked the Liberal Democrats out of existence. They lost almost all their seats. So, and this is a party headed by a politician named Nigel Farage, who I really did not know very much about. I still don't know a lot about him, but he apparently is a really smart guy and is addressing a lot of the concerns of the people of Great Britain, particularly those people who live in the rural areas and the small towns and the smaller cities in England. Now, my understanding is from what I was reading that in London, the Tories and Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats have most of their support. And of course, all three of those parties have more or less the same agenda in the modern world in the 21st century. They're probably controlled by more or less the same people who have similar, maybe not always perfectly coinciding and overlapping goals, but similar, close enough. They want to perhaps reach the same goal, but maybe not quite in this exact same way. And we see this a lot among the great movers and shakers of the planet. So I come back to the United States and not really thrilled with the idea of jumping back into kind of a world in which you sort of feel like you're in the belly of the beast, where just wondering when the United States will launch its latest dust up, creating problems around the world in various countries for the purpose of advancing its own interests. And the interests of the United States just happen to coincide not with the interests of the American people, but with the interests of the very small elite, power elite group of aristocratic Americans. And I say aristocrats because that's what they are. They behave like aristocrats, and they might as well be. The only difference between an English aristocrat or a Dutch aristocrat or a Spanish one or a Swedish one is that the American aristocrats do not have titles. They do not give themselves titles. They don't call themselves Prince so-and-so or Queen so-and-so or Countess or Duke or Earl or any of the other titles that the European aristocratic class love to bestow upon each other with grand ceremonies. The way that the American aristocrats do it, they give themselves awards also, but they don't use the same names because the designation of royalty is specifically forbidden by the U.S. Constitution. And they're quite happy with giving themselves all kinds of pats on the back and public awards in order to aggrandize their egos, assuage their need to be larger than life. And so I get back to the United States, and lo and behold, of course, the same shenanigans are going on that we've been seeing for many, many years in this country, and indeed all throughout history. Nothing new about it. But the fact that people ignore it for the most part is what is distressing, because this allows them to continue doing it. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the latest very unusual and strange little event that took place. It doesn't even seem to have gotten that much coverage. I suppose it did among a certain group of TV watchers in the 24-hour news cycle, but it's the Jared and Amanda Miller murder suicide deal that blows up into the television set like this enormous explosion, then it fades away very quickly. What you're looking at on screen is a screenshot. It's a photo. It's a still from an interview that Gerard Miller did at the Bundy Ranch. Now, what is the Bundy Ranch? This is back in April. The Bundy Ranch was the scene of a standoff between the Bureau of Land Management and the Bundy family and their friends and supporters, apparently close to 1,000 people, that went on. There was a culmination of a very long dispute between this rancher, Bundy, and the Bureau of Land Management. Now, the Bureau of Land Management has gone along with the idea that ranchers who can use public land to graze their cattle. This has been going on for a very, very long time. But back in the 90s, the U.S. government decided that they would start charging the ranchers grazing fees. And most of these ranchers paid these grazing fees, and a lot of them found them apparently too costly, and it cut into their profits too much, and they just simply got out of the business of being ranchers because of these grazing fees. Well, Bundy has stuck it out and refused to pay the fees, and so this confrontation escalated for a very long time, and it got very ugly, although it didn't actually bust out into direct violence. You had two sides essentially almost aiming weapons. They were both armed. One thing that the mainstream media does not mention is that you had some very well-armed BLM people at that ranch, and they were determined they were going to corral Bundy's cattle and essentially get them, take them, kill them. They did apparently kill a lot. They found a mass grave of his cattle, some of them, and there were others that I'm assuming they were planning to shoot them as well. When Bundy and all this group came in and confronted them and forced the BLM to back down. Now there was a few interviews out of these thousands of this close to 1,000 people apparently, and one of them was Jared Miller. Jared Miller got interviewed by NBC, and you see the way he's dressed. He's supposedly a supporter of Bundy and what he does, and he also you can watch it on YouTube. He threatens violence. And of course, one thing that the Bundy supporters did not want was violence, but he seemed to take the attitude, bring it on, we will respond with violence. And very shortly after that, he was actually asked to leave by the Bundys and their supporters. And he was forced out, and he got hysterical angry when they forced him to leave. And the reason why they said that they wanted him to leave is because he was apparently wanting violence too much. And I don't know how they found out he was a felon, a convicted felon, or how they knew he was carrying. Maybe he had a rifle or a pistol, I don't know. But anyway, he was asked to leave and he left. And then now, recently, in the last several days, he and his wife, Amanda, first used Facebook and other social media to build up an image of themselves that was consistent with right-wing loving, violence loving, Second Amendment loving, Constitution loving, anti-government, government hating people. They build up this profile. It's all public, of course, on Facebook. Very, very elaborate profile. You could see them building it as you look at the posts. And also there were other social media sites and they put down who they liked, and they put down everybody who's right-wing. Everybody's right-wing. At other places on the social media posts, he mentions that he did vote for Obama. And he's very sorry that he voted for Obama. What this all seems to point toward is that this convicted felon who had a lot of trouble with the law over the years, who the FBI was aware of, in fact, they talked to him 3 times, and he would make direct threats against the police, saying he was going to kill cops, it was okay to kill cops, if they would kick in his door, he would shoot them, on and on and on, how he was going to be a cop killer. Okay, next, then they moved to, he and Amanda, his wife, who was his wife for the last few years, they moved to Nevada. Why did they move to Nevada? Because there is a Tea Party style right-wing candidate who is trying to get elected there, and they came in to support him. And and he explains how he completely changed his political views over the last couple of years, and now is a rabid, most radical, violent right-winger, from being a supporter of Obama to a right-winger. What does that tell you? My experience from the past is that if you are in an anti-government group, if you're in an anti-war group, if you're in any kind of a group which is striving for social and political change, the member of that group who advocates using violence is almost always a federal agent. Over and over and over I've seen this, and others have seen this and noticed this over the years. Back in the 60s, the guy who was the most radical with the longest hair and the most extreme views and was trying to really excite people to go out and, blow things up and revolution and destroy, use violence to get their aims, that peace was not working. That person was actually working as an agent provocateur for the U.S. government. All part of the MK Ultra program to infiltrate anti-government or objectionable groups that they want to discredit, and it gives the government the pretext to crack down. Governments have always done this, not just in the United States. It's nothing new at all. So we have to expect this. You always have to expect this first. And so when we hear the story of all the warnings being fulfilled, saying they were going to kill cops, then what they do is, very soon after moving to Las Vegas, then they go into a pizza place, they shoot and execute, they murder 2 police officers. On one police officer's body, they put a Nazi flag or insignia, and the other one they put a Tea Party insignia, which is the Don't Tread on Me flag, very famous, very old American flag. Actually predates the United States flag that we know of. It was the original flag of the revolutionary people who were fighting against England. So those 2, so you get the correspondence of the 2, Nazi and Don't Tread on Me, right-wing Tea Party, and the statement is made. And what is the statement? Well, that's for the viewer to decide for himself, essentially. Is the statement that these police officers are Nazis? Or is the statement that Jared Miller and Amanda Miller are Nazis? It goes both ways. And I think a lot of people would make the connection between the Tea Party and the Nazi Party right there. Because everything that Jared Miller did and said for the last couple of years points toward building himself an image which goes against the type of image that he had before. This guy is not your typical Tea Party advocate. Most of the Tea Party people are gray hairs. They are old-fashioned mom, apple pie, baseball kind of people who go for the old values. They're not covered with tattoos like Jared Miller was. They certainly don't paint themselves up as the Joker and make YouTube videos and rants about how they support the Tea Party. It just makes no sense. But yes, he did that. You can watch him dressed up as the Joker and ranting. And how Amanda Miller was turned into this cold-blooded killer who supposedly shot Jared at that Walmart. After they killed the 2 police officers, they walked into a Walmart. They were almost taken out by a concealed carry guy who unfortunately did not realize that Amanda was with Jared. They were screaming and yelling, and he shot a gun off at Walmart saying, "This is the start of the revolution." Amazing. So he didn't even notice her, walked right by her, and she killed him. Very sad. But then the story unfolds that they're surrounded by police, a SWAT team, she shoots him and then shoots herself. Well, a new wrinkle on that has just come out. Apparently, the bullet did not match the bullet that was from Amanda Miller's gun, and it was actually from a member of the police force who shot Jared Miller. Now, how much of this actually happened, I don't know. I saw what was supposedly the surveillance video of the last moments of Amanda and Jared Miller's lives while they're lying on the floor in the middle of the Walmart, and I really couldn't get much information out of this video at all. It looked like just a couple of still frames. It was kind of like the 5 frames that were released that was supposed to show us that an airplane slammed into the Pentagon, and really doesn't show anything at all. There's no airplane in those 5 frames at all. So you wonder, what's going on here? A lot of questions. Like so many of these things, people have questions. And I just sort of almost at random selected a video off YouTube that is about 7 minutes long. And it's sort of interesting. You may agree with part of it, or may you think it's totally crazy. But this is what some people are coming up with. And it does have some interesting information in it, so you can look at it and decide what about it yourself. Let's go and look at it now. Here we go. Okay, so there you have it. The video makes some interesting points about the modus operandi of this very mysterious young man named Jared Miller. Now, Amanda Miller, I haven't seen as much information about Amanda Miller. According to her father, she was just a sweet girl who got somehow indoctrinated or brainwashed by Jared Miller into this amazing situation where she's coolly shooting police officers in the head and then shoots her boyfriend, well, not her husband, I should say, shoots herself and is into cold-blooded stuff. This is not so simple for just an ordinary person to do unless they've been trained for it, to actually do this. I cannot speak about her with I just have not seen enough information. Now maybe as time goes on, we will learn more about Amanda Miller, how she got to be the way that she was. And really, you know, it's very difficult to say, are these people really dead? Are any of these people really dead? It's so difficult because right now, the media, it has everything so locked up, so controlled, that it is really almost dangerous for mainstream reporters, journalists, to dig too deeply into the reality of this type of situation, these stories. The first defense that's used against journalism is always, well, this is still under investigation, and therefore we cannot reveal we cannot give you the information that you seek. The next, of course, excuse that's always used is national security. We can't give you the information because it's national security. Or sometimes they don't even give them an explanation. They just simply do not respond. They ignore. And there are some very, very frightened people in the media, in the mainstream media, and in the government. So both sides have a lot of frightened people. They know what will happen to them if they were to reveal certain key facts concerning these really important events. We have to say that of all the events that have happened in the last 15 years, since 9/11, the major and the greatest, the events that have the greatest impact on the society are virtually always these violent events. And right from 9/11 on, through the underwear bomber, the shoe bomber, and then now the series of shootings, the whole effort seems to be to create an atmosphere of paranoia and fear of certain targeted groups. And right now, the Tea Party is really gaining ground. And so it's important for the other side, in order to restore balance to the whole system, to try to knock down the Tea Party to the level where they are more manageable. It's events like the Jared Miller and Amanda Miller thing which really take, or attempt to take, the wind out of the sails of the high-flying Tea Party. And it's worked in the past. It will definitely have an impact unless people simply don't believe it, that what they're seeing if they do not believe what they see on television anymore, then the propaganda and the attempt to influence the mindset and the opinions and the belief systems will fail. It all depends on that. It all depends on what used to be a given. When you look back in the 60s at the way life in America was, and you only had 3 stations, NBC, ABC, and CBS, essentially, and you had your evening father figure, your anchor, like Walter Cronkite, being the most archetypal father figure that probably has ever existed in the media world in the United States or anywhere in the world. This guy was perfect as a father figure. And he would always close out a show with, and that's the way it is. In other words, you can trust me, this is the truth. And really people did buy into it. We find out later that Walter Cronkite may not have been quite as honest and true blue as he appeared to be. That he was a spokesman, that he was the frontman, he was the face of the government, of the corporations, the corporate government. That's what we have now, a corporate government. It's an amalgamation of American and worldwide corporations, and they are so deeply entrenched into the halls of power that there really is no way of ever, well, I don't want to say ever, but it would be very, very difficult to extricate the corporate influence from government today. So what you have is a very powerful propaganda outlet via the media. And very gradually, over many decades, many people around the world are losing their faith in the supposed truth of the mainstream media. This is why the alternative media is flourishing so much. And you still have people saying, well, I don't believe anything I read on the internet, which is kind of hilarious considering that all the mainstream media is also on the internet. If I tell someone I read a story, an article about such and such on the internet, they laugh, or some of my friends sort of think that's ha 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 ha. But then I tell them, well, I read it in the New York Times on the internet. Then, oh, it's like, because they believe the New York Times. Why do they believe the New York Times? Because, you know, if you cannot trust the New York Times, who can you trust? The Gray Lady, the newspaper of record. And it's true, of course, that a newspaper like the New York Times does try to get it right as much as it can. Where I've said this before, but where the New York Times fails, and this is where all the mainstream media fails, is not in a blatant, outright falsehood, but in what they call the lie of omission. And that is simply, you simply don't tell the entire story. You tell the story, the part of the story that will bolster the agenda, whatever that agenda may be. And maybe some of this is just an omission because of human nature, the fallibility of human nature, or maybe it's more deliberate, or maybe it's both, and probably it's both. But nevertheless, for that person who is interested in finding out the truth, then you have to take that into account whenever you read an article in any kind of media outlet. And that goes for the alternative news as well. And one of the aspects that I find very strong in the alternative media is that these alternative media people don't necessarily have a lot of prestige. They don't have a fat paycheck, many of them. Some of them, a lot of these people really don't get paid, if at all. Maybe they sell ads on their blog or something. A few of them are probably doing very, very well, but most of them, many of them, like this blogger, I don't know who that guy was. He just comes up, does with his research, and puts this stuff out there. But this is the way it always should be. These are citizen journalists. This is what is essential in a free society, is that people are informed, people do the research, people make up their own minds. They don't follow the party line strictly, necessarily. It's just like, I was raised in a very liberal and, in fact, really socialistic household. And I grew up that way. That's the way I was trained to think. But it was very, very gradually, over time, that I became disillusioned with the Democrats. I never liked the Republicans either, particularly. But the Democrats seemed to let me down over and over. You would think, well, the Democrats wouldn't get us in an unjust and illegal and completely wrong-headed war, would they? They wouldn't do that. But they did. And this is stretching all the way back to Vietnam with Lyndon Baines Johnson. We let him carry the torch of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And he was supposed to carry on the legacy, and what did he do? He didn't get us out of Vietnam, he escalated it. And we saw, or I saw, and many others saw, that he was beholden to the very same people that those warmongering Republicans who were advocating nuking Vietnam or nuking Cuba or nuking Russia or nuking China, whoever wanted to just wipe them off the face of the earth, that really, what was the difference? Well, the difference was that you could say, well, he didn't nuke them, but they used other means. They used other means. Just like Obama is not using the entire might of the U.S. military to attack and occupy a country. No, he's going in and using drone strikes, and he has all these teams running around assassinating people in various countries and destabilizing the countries and giving training, giving weapons, giving medical aid, giving advice to the various groups that those who basically tell Obama what to do, giving the aid and comfort to those groups and strengthening those groups that they believe will further American interests. And I always find that amusing that they constantly use that term interests. These are not my interests. I'm not getting anything out of this. None of my friends are. Nobody is actually getting anything. Why is this? Does anybody interested in my interest? My interests are not this way. I feel like people should just get along, and not be fighting with each other. And there's got to be a better way than sending in NATO, like in Libya, to completely demolish the infrastructure and throw the entire country into chaos, and so that you have literally hundreds of fighting groups struggling for power instead of one strong man at the top. But they say, well, Gaddafi was bad. He was bad. He was a dictator. And we have to get rid of dictators so that democracy can flourish. Well, I don't think those people in Libya really understand what democracy is. You need to be an educated populace to understand, to realize that democracy is about compromise. It's about giving up part of what you want so that you can get something else, and cooperation from somebody who doesn't feel necessarily the same way you think. The people in Libya didn't seem to understand that. They did understand that the strong man at the top would kill them, would torture them, would imprison them if they tried to change his way of doing things. And that's not a good thing. That's terrible. But to go in there and just blow the living hell out of Libya and open up Gaddafi's entire arsenal to whomever wants to take a piece of it and run off into the streets and into the jungles of Africa with that, I mean, that is the upshot. It's not worth it to do that. It doesn't make sense, and it's not very good planning. Unless it is good planning if that was your intent from the beginning, to destabilize Africa. And, you know, the world planners, they oh my gosh, Libya, this guy Gaddafi, this man is creating a stable government in North Africa. He has oil revenue. He has revenue from other sources. He is getting too big for his britches. He wants to become the top dog in all of Africa and be the leader, the spokesman, the godlike figure that sits on top of the entire continent of Africa and calls the shots. We can't allow that. How are we going to be able to get access to those natural resources in all those undeveloped and third world countries in that enormous continent of Africa? How are we going to do that if he's in there with his people, working with the Chinese, with whom he has excellent relations? This man needs to go down. We can no longer support him. He is not in our best interest. He is not acting in our best interest. It is in our interest to take out Gaddafi. And they did. They did take out Gaddafi with the help of NATO. But mostly it's an American show. NATO follows along. And yes, there are European countries like France and other European countries that will benefit from the destruction of the stable but dictatorial government of Omar Gaddafi. People said Omar Gaddafi was crazy. Well, maybe he was a little bit crazy, but he was nevertheless competent. And I think the definition of whether or not a person is crazy is whether they can get stuff done and function. That's about the only definite way to pin down what insanity actually is. Does he function? Can he function? If you cannot function, then it's much easier to diagnose a person with some sort of mental illness because they're just not making it on the street. It's very difficult to pin down through a blood test or an MRI or any other physical test exactly what is mental illness. So anyway, yeah, whether or not Omar Gaddafi was mentally ill, that's a question for the historians to answer. And they will probably argue about that for a long time. But right now, you have groups who are very well armed in Africa, and they are causing all kinds of problems in other countries, like, for instance, the group of radical Islamists, Boko Haram, or whatever the name is. They kidnapped about 250 girls, and they claimed that they were going to make them into good Muslims, and I saw a photograph of these girls, some of them, and they were all wearing burqas, and apparently they were not even Muslim before, but they forced them to wear these burqas. But I've also heard that some of these Muslim fighters took them as wives, and maybe they sold some, I don't know, into sex slavery. Sex slavery, of course, is a huge international business in which all the big players are partaking in. Many of them, of course, are pedophiles, so they would have another reason besides money to get involved in this business. It's very profitable and getting bigger. They particularly like European children to kidnap girls, blondes, and so on. They fetch a higher price, and it's really awful, and it's horrible the way that this is being allowed to flourish in the United States and many other countries. But these fringe groups in Nigeria, in Burundi, in Sudan, in Egypt, and many other countries, you have people thinking very clearly about, should we support this group or not? Should we try to suppress this group? Should we back the government of this country, this particular country, or should we back the rebels? Which group, if they have control of the country, will operate in our best interests? It's not in the interests of the country, of the people. They may say that, but it's really our interests. Which group will further our interests? You see how sick that is? And wrong? That is sick and wrong, no doubt. Really, you know, the ultimate, of course, is how does it affect us here in the United States? I mean, we as American citizens, we sit back and we watch our government do all of these things, some legal, some illegal, in our interests. And some people would no doubt say, well, if it's illegal, it doesn't matter. That's fine as long as it's in our interests. Because after all, we're America. We are exceptional. We are special. We have powers. We are the new Ubermensch of the world, the master race. We are better than anyone else, and that justifies our behavior, our illegal behavior. We are above the law. Our leaders are above the law. Our military is above the law. And why? Because we are virtually gods. We are Americans. And so that justifies it all. Nothing new there. Again, historically speaking, any top dog country will let its power go to its head, and they begin to think this way. It unfortunately appears to be just part of human nature. And we have to realize that we are not better than other people. We're just ordinary people. We are not exceptional. And what we're seeing is that down the road, many of this behavior, it's not going to turn out well for us in the long run. There will be a piper to pay, and this is just a matter of how the universe works. There is no escaping this. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. That's the old saying. And there are plenty of other very chilling old sayings out there that will sort of back up what I'm saying on this. Now, part of this, of course, is part of the way that people think about payback, blowback. You reap what you sow. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. The planners, the central planners, the shadow government people, all the people in the intelligence community, the 26 or how many ever secret intelligence agencies, all these people are aware that the human mindset is that, you know, we got to pay for this some way or another. All this bad stuff we're doing, we have to pay for this. And they think, now how can we use this? How can we turn this to our advantage? People will think that they deserve to suffer, and therefore if we make them suffer and we gain by making them suffer, they will not blame us. They will blame payback. They will blame the universe. They will blame God. They will blame karma. Because after all, you reap what you sow. It's the law of the universe. And we'll be able to get away with it. All we have to do is direct them and tell them that it wasn't us. We didn't do it. When in fact they did. So they're not stupid. They have gone to the very best universities in the known world, the Ivy League universities, which they have classes in these universities to teach these kids how to think this way and outthink you and me. What's the old thing that they say? It's like, these people are playing multi-dimensional chess, and most Americans are barely playing checkers, if that. So it's a whole different level of game theory thinking. And it's all about playing the game and knowing how to play the game. And the one-dimensional thinker will always be out-thought by the multi-dimensional thinker. And this is how they gain the upper hand. This is how they maintain control and power. These people would not have power over us if they didn't have the ability to do this complex and subtle thinking and just simply outthink people. That's where it starts. That's why they have think tanks. What do you think they do in those think tanks? You have left-wing think tanks. You have right-wing think tanks. You have moderate think tanks. That's what they do. They sit around and they think and they plan and they meet. And they meet in places like Davos and Bilderberg. Bilderberg is not it's the name that's been given to a meeting that happens once a year. And many other secret meetings that are blatantly illegal, but they do it anyway because no one is stopping them, so why don't they just continue to do it? You have world leaders meeting in secret and not going back to their various countries and telling the people what they talked about and the plans that they made. They will not talk about it, even though there's more media spotlight that's being placed on these people, but they weasel out of it somehow. So I think my time is almost up. How much time do I have?
5 minutes. Well, 4 minutes, 10 seconds.
1 minute?
4 minutes and 10 seconds.
So I have all kinds of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, you have to take it into, you have to look at the perspective. You have to think about how they think. You have to try to put yourselves in their shoes. What would I do if I were in a position of great power? Of great power. So that you had the media at your command. You had the military at your command. You had the legislative branch at your command, the judicial branch at your command, and the executive branch at your command, more or less. What would you do? With great power comes great responsibility. I guess that's what Spider-Man said. And yes, that is true. And unfortunately, a lot of these leaders are acting irresponsibly, at least from our point of view. Those people who do not have great power may find themselves sacrificed or ignored or gagged. We have, a situation where the gag order, this is getting into a different area a little bit, the gag order is being used more and more and more to silence people. And I'm thinking particularly of Bowe Bergdahl. He was an Army private who apparently walked away from his base in Afghanistan and joined the Taliban. Now, people are going to debate whether that's really true or not, but that's what a lot of the military people are now saying. But this happened 5 years ago when he disappeared from his military outpost. And people are saying, well, of course, but he was a prisoner. He was a prisoner. It was a prisoner of war. Was he? I still think it's a bit unclear. But I can say one thing, this is what I've read, is that the entire brigade was ordered not to speak to anybody about the circumstances of Bo Bergdahl's disappearance. And there was a lot of very frightened people, and they kept their silence. It was a gag order, a blanket gag order, which only recently has been breached, and now the floodgates have opened since Bergdahl is now back in the United States after being handed over by the Taliban to the U.S. military in exchange for 5 inmates of Guantanamo Bay. Now, the media is saying that these 5 prisoners were top-level Taliban guys, Well, I doubt if they're actually going to be worth very much after how many years did they spend in Guantanamo? 10, maybe? Their brains are probably about semi-jelly at this point after all the torture and the isolation. They cannot be normal. There's been studies that have shown that within a matter of a few hours, 48 hours or something like that, there's actual damage to the brain as a result of being kept in solitary confinement. And not only were these guys kept in solitary confinement, they weren't even allowed to hear anything. They put earmuffs on them. They tied them in shackles. They kept them from seeing anything. They couldn't hear or see anything for long periods of time. And you talk about torture. That will make you go insane faster than anything else. So I doubt if these guys have any value to the Taliban at all. And really, what is the Taliban? The Taliban is just a series of different groups that has an umbrella title called the Taliban, which means Islamic student, essentially. Talib. It means student. So
10 seconds.
Okay. Oh, that's all for today. Anyway, I ran out of time. Have a great evening and sleep well. Better